Morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. On behalf of Sparc Technologies, ticker SPN, I'd like to welcome you to today's investor webinar. Today's session is in listen-only mode, but you do have the option at the end of the session to ask questions through the chat box, and Nick will get around once he's finished the formal presentation and answer any questions you may have. So presenting today is Managing Director Nick O'Loughlin from Sparc, who will provide an update on Sparc's progress across its graphene-based additives platform, including, which we hopefully all saw, the recently announced commercial development for ecosparc, the first cab off the rank, and an overview of activity across Sparc Hydrogen as it also enters a pivotal year post the startup of the pilot plant. So thank you, Nick, for joining us today, and I'm going to hand over to Nick now to run through the presentation.
Thank you, Aidan, and nice to be with everyone this morning. I will run through the full deck that was released to the ASX this morning. I'll skip over some of the slides that have been presented before and try and focus on some of the material updates as we go through. Just a recap to Sparc Technologies. We are a business of two technology segments, each with their own markets and stages of commercialization. On the left, we have Sparc Hydrogen, where we are a founding shareholder and remain a key shareholder alongside Fortescue and what is now Adelaide University. And we hold 36% of that joint venture, which is developing next generation green hydrogen production technology. Other technology segment is ecosparc, or our graphene-based additives division, where we are developing additives for the protective coatings industry. And as Aidan mentioned, we had our first commercial sale late last year, and we have a number of other commercial opportunities ahead of us during 2026. From a corporate perspective, this is largely self-explanatory. We reported our December quarterly cash figure late last week, so we had just shy of $2 million in the bank. We remain very judicious with our spending as we approach key commercialization milestones, particularly on ecosparc. The other point to mention is our top 20 shareholders have been very stable over a very long period, so we're very grateful for that. So this is another way of presenting the funnel, as I like to think of it, in terms of the opportunities in front of the company. On the left are the two segments I've described at a high level. And then we have our research and development portfolio, where we're active across a number of streams. We have a sustainable packaging project with Detmold Packaging, which is a leading private company based in Adelaide, but they sell globally to brands like McDonald's, Subway, and many, many others. And we're looking to develop more sustainable linings for some of their paper packaging products utilizing graphene. We have an aquaculture project where we have a couple of partners active on that, plus government grant funding, which is looking at making more sustainable and durable aquaculture materials, where we utilize some of graphene's conductive properties, among others. And thirdly, we have an AI project, which we are the early stages of developing, which we're working with the Australian Institute of Machine Learning, which is looking at visual corrosion assessment. So we have a number of exciting opportunities which represent the next wave of potential commercial opportunities for the business behind ecosparc and our work in Sparc Hydrogen. So I'll start with ecosparc and our work with that product. And the first point I'd like to touch on is what's happening in graphene more broadly. So graphene has been around for about 20 years and it's undergone a number of, I would say, hype cycles. But this time seems to be a little bit different. We're at the early stages of what seems to be growing use of graphene in a variety of different applications. And it seems to be more real insofar as the companies that are developing their different graphene enhanced or graphene products are definitely bona fide. And some of the customers utilizing those products are some of the larger companies across the different industries. So sort of cautiously optimistic about graphene as a material, and some of what's driving that is the lower costs of producing graphene and the number of different sources of those production methods, which is positive for Sparc and obviously a number of these other companies in this space. So the problem that we look to address with our ecosparc product is the cost of maintaining steel assets, which are subject to corrosion. So all steel in the environment is corroding all the time. And the way that we protect against corrosion is using coatings. So these are called protective coatings. And in an industrial sense, they are very thick coatings that are applied and then constantly reapplied throughout the life of the asset to avoid the detrimental impacts of excess corrosion. The ecosparc additive is a graphene-based additive which drops into existingly used protective coatings. We have developed and tested this product over 6 years in our own labs and in external laboratories as well. And we've seen consistent performance boosts from the use of the additive at relatively low dosage rates. So our results over 9 rounds of cyclic testing show improvements in the corrosion creep, which is the current standard, international standard of measuring the effectiveness of the protective coating has improved by between 26 and 79% over those 9 rounds of testing. So we have over 10,000 data points. We've done thousands of panels. And we've had that validation now in external laboratories as well, which is really driving what we're seeing now in terms of the commercial uptake of the product. The value and use of ecosparc is relatively simple when you think of the owners of steel infrastructure. So critical steel infrastructure is infrastructure which is used day in, day out, and really keeps the industrial world turning. So we're talking about ports, jetties, ships, mining infrastructure, oil and gas, and many, many other types of infrastructure which are subject to corrosive environments. So as I said at the top, coatings, protective coatings are used on these assets regularly, and maintenance is undertaken throughout the life cycle of the asset to protect against the impacts of corrosion. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to have to replace your steel. It's much cheaper to maintain the asset through reapplying the coatings. Now, what ecosparc does is basically increases the durability and lifespan of these protective coatings such that you can push out the time between maintenance events. So that might go from 5 years for a certain asset to 6 or 7 or 8 years. In some other cases, it might be even shorter than that. Some other cases in less corrosive environments might be a bit longer than that. But if you can push out your time between maintenance events, even fractionally, the cost savings are really significant for the asset owner because, as you might expect, the cost of maintaining an asset, a very small fraction of that is the cost of the coating. We're talking about under 5%. So by paying slightly more for your coating and getting an increased lifespan such that you do less maintenance over the life cycle, the returns for the asset owners are really, really significant. And that's what we've been pushing with a number of the asset owners that we've been working with directly on field trials with our product. So we talk about a dual track approach to market. And what that means very simply is that we are targeting releases of ecosparc enhanced coatings products at the end of the day. That is our selling point. That is our route to market. But there's 2 ways that we can access that market. The first is through doing testing and trials with the coatings manufacturers directly. And there's some examples of the major coatings companies on the screen here. So we've been under test now with some of these companies for over 3, in some cases over 4 years, and obviously very extensive testing programs. And we're now approaching the point where they're getting comfortable to release ecosparc enhanced products, which is very pleasing. So that would be an existing product where they adopt our additive into it. It goes in at a very low dosage rate, and it becomes an ecosparc enhanced version of whatever that current product is. The second route to market or way we access the market is through working directly with coatings users. And these, at the large end of town, you can think of as large oil and gas companies, mining companies, governments, other large infrastructure owners. So we've been really quite successful in targeting companies in that realm. and saying, look, you can work with us to perform either field trials or collaborative testing programs with some of our long-standing relationships with the coatings manufacturers. We'll do that testing with you, and we'll show you the performance benefits of using our additive. So in that space, particularly at the larger end, these end users have their own specifications of coatings. These are the list of coatings that can be used on their assets. And what we're targeting in those testing programs is to get the ecosparc enhanced version of the coating onto those specifications. And that is a direct pull through of that product into the market, and therefore our additive as well. So we've got a number of different testing programs where we do have coatings manufacturer, coatings end user, and Sparc all working collaboratively to that end. The field trials that we've been undertaking have now been ongoing in terms of the pictures on the right-hand side of this screen for 12 to 18 months. And in November last year, we announced a collaboration with Dulux at the Cape Jaffa Lighthouse. That recoating job was actually completed in December, so it was really quite quick. And we'll be monitoring the performance of that trial over coming months, with obviously the view to hopefully releasing an ecosparc enhanced version of the Dulux product, which is called Durabil STE. So the field trial is a really good way to de-risk the use of the additive in the paint for the coatings company itself, and it adds that market visibility, in this case with the National Trust, who have a large number of assets in Australia that require protected coatings. Utilise that as a way to demonstrate the commercial driver for our product as well. A thing I really like about this side of our business is the scalability and of the route to market. So in terms of a commercial rollout and what that looks like, I can sort of summarize it at a high level like this. So we would have ecosparc adopted into a coatings company's product range. They would then release that ecosparc enhanced version of the product and receive orders for the ecosparc enhanced coating from the asset owners like National Trust, government, large oil and gas users, etc. Sparc supplies the additive on a per kilo basis. So we sell the additive in drums, like you can see on the screen there, and we can produce that additive commercially right now in our manufacturing facility in Adelaide. We sell on a per kilo basis, and the paint company uses that additive, tips it in at the point of manufacture, and you've got the ecosparc enhanced version of the product. And at a high level, using sort of round numbers, every litre of coating, which is the ecosparc enhanced version, delivers about $1 of revenue for Sparc. So $1 per litre is a good way to think about it. And we have manufacturing facility today, which can dose about 4.5 million litres of coatings. So what that represents on a global scale is, starting with Australia, 4.5 million litres is a touch over 5% of the market for protective coatings. And Australia within the global market, ex-China, is less than 5% of the overall volumes, which are around about 2 billion litres. So you can see it's a very significant market opportunity. Sparc estimates that the addressable market for ecosparc enhanced coatings is approximately 500 million litres. And if you remember that $1 per litre metric, you can work out sort of the addressable overall market for sales of our additive. So you put that together with what we believe is the leading graphene enhanced product in the market, and you've got a really compelling growth story there. This is the pipeline that we first showed just before Christmas. And I guess as we move down the funnel to the right-hand side on the commercial side, we made our first sale to an Asian coatings company late last year, first of many, I'm hoping. And we're in active discussions on commercial releases of ecosparc enhanced products, and I'm hoping to conclude the first of those this quarter. From there, the goal for us is to push, as many of those participants in the middle of the funnel there over to the right. And one of the things about the coatings market is it's always described as a fast follower market. It's always toughest to get the first one across the line. But once you do, particularly given the number of trials and testing programs we've got underway, I'm confident that we'll be able to fairly rapidly expand the number of ecosparc enhanced products in the market from there. And why I say we've got the leading product in the market, that's based on data and experience, whereby we've been developing our additives for more than 6 years now. We've developed more data than anyone else in the industry, to our knowledge, utilizing graphene-based additives in protective coatings. We have a highly experienced team from the coatings industry and a lab team working with graphene incorporation into those coatings day in, day out. We had that validated with an award at the Middle East Corrosion Conference, where we co-authored a paper with Aramco. In fact, the chair of Aramco's coatings committee. So we've got really strong relationships and credibility in the industry, and we're now translating that credibility into commercial action and sales. I'll now switch on to Sparc Hydrogen, which is the second of our technology divisions. And we've obviously had some milestones there late last year as well, with respect to the pilot plant that we've developed at the Roseworthy campus. But to start with, to provide an introduction of what we're doing in Sparc Hydrogen, if I was to summarize the goal of the company, it's to develop, the lowest cost green hydrogen production method, demonstrating that through our photocatalytic water splitting reactor technology. So we are doing something very different to the 99% of other green hydrogen developers or OEMs in this space, which rely on a technology or a process called electrolysis. We've decided and taken a leading position in an alternate method of production called photocatalysis. And when I say we, I'm talking about the Sparc Hydrogen partnership, which is made up of Sparc Technologies, Fortescue, and Adelaide University. Sparc Technologies was a founder of the joint venture, and we currently hold 36% of the entity alongside Fortescue, who has the same interest. And the Adelaide University is where the technology came from, and it's where the research team is currently based. They hold 28%. We are well funded within the joint venture, particularly having secured a $2.75 million grant in the middle of last year. So we're well funded through 2026 and the milestones that we have got laid out over that period. In addition to the technology development itself, we have an experienced and growing team. We added Alana Barlow, who is an executive from the hydrogen industry. She joined late last year, having been at the Queensland government in their hydrogen team, and before that with Sumitomo, where she took a leading role in developing the Gladstone Green Hydrogen project in collaboration with Rio Tinto, which I believe is still the largest green hydrogen final investment decision that's been taken within the country to date. So she's now got her feet under the ground, under the desk, so to speak, and is actively pursuing the different objectives that we've got within the JV over the next 6 to 12 months. So she's been an excellent addition to the team alongside Greg and Vino, who I've discussed before. So this is a new slide, but I think it's an important one to understand what photocatalytic water splitting is at a high level, and also what we're targeting in terms of the technology development and where it can go. So the three key ingredients for photocatalysis are sunlight and water, efficient and durable photocatalyst materials, and scalable reactors. And Sparc Hydrogen is particularly focused on the third element there in terms of the scalable reactors. Now, the key production metric, which you can think of as, how the electrolysis space talks about electrolyzer efficiency. For photocatalysis, the key efficiency metric, which is directly correlated to production, is called solar to hydrogen efficiency. So that basically says how much of the sun's energy you're converting into chemical energy in the form of hydrogen. Now, pleasingly, what we've seen over the last 4 years of the Sparc Hydrogen JV, but increasingly so, is that the solar to hydrogen efficiency of photocatalysts is improving. and it's improved from low single-digit percentages to approaching sort of and at around 10% solid hydrogen for best-in-class materials today. The theoretical efficiency limit for photocatalysis is about 30%, which is actually similar to solar PV in terms of how efficient those panels are in converting sunlight's energy into electricity. So it's a very similar metric in that way. Now, what we've done within Sparc Hydrogen is take a leading position in developing scalable reactors for performing photocatalysis. And that has translated into what we see on screen, which is the Roseworthy pilot plant, which we completed and commissioned late last year. So this is a first of its kind facility which utilizes concentrated sunlight incorporated with photocatalytic water splitting. So basically, we have a mirror system there, and on the bottom rows of that infrastructure, they are mirrors. They reflect solar energy up into that central receiver, and that's where we produce and combine the photocatalyst material with the water and the sunlight to produce hydrogen and oxygen. So, as mentioned, we got first bubbles from the facility late last year. We're now operating the facility and certainly learning a lot, and it's operating very well to this point in time. So it'll be very much a step forward for our technology, but also the broader photocatalytic water splitting industry. Now, the direct comparator to what we're doing up at Roseworthy and with our technology in terms of a production method for green hydrogen is what is currently done with electrolysis today. So that's the incumbent technology at the bottom half of the screen there, where you take solar energy from the sun, you convert that into electrical energy through a solar PV panel. You then feed that electricity into an electrolyzer to split water into hydrogen and oxygen. So it's a two-step process: solar energy, electricity, electrolyzer, hydrogen. In our method, we use a single piece of infrastructure, a concentrated solar infrastructure, and within our reactor, we split water into hydrogen and oxygen directly. So it's called a direct solar to hydrogen technology. Now, when you're talking about any renewable energy technology, a key driver of cost per unit of production is the CapEx. And as you can see on the screen here, the infrastructure that we use is vastly simpler than the infrastructure that the incumbent technology uses. So that gives us the opportunity to be low cost. This is also a new slide, and bear with me as I talk through it here. But we've talked about on just then the driver that is CapEx in terms of the cost per unit of hydrogen. Now, the second element there is how much you produce from a given amount of energy. Now, in terms of solar PV, those solar panels are very efficient already. There's been 30 to 40 years of R&D that's gone into them, and there's only very small incremental gains that can be made from where we are today. Same with electrolyzers. Electrolyzers have been around for over 100 years, believe it or not, and the efficiency gains there are also quite marginal. So there's not much room to grow for solar PV electrolysis in terms of efficiency. Now, photocatalysis, we're currently at that 5 to 10% solar hydrogen efficiency. There is a huge amount of growth to get to that 30% limit. And what we're seeing is better materials be developed all the time. And our reactors, we believe, are moving the ball forward as well in terms of utilizing those materials at increasingly high efficiencies under concentrated solar light and driving photocatalysis from where it is today, which is kind of bordering what is economic into something that is economic in the very near future. Now, if we could do that and be the leading player in the reactor space, there is a massive opportunity, massive value as well for the technology within this industry. The development pathway that we've taken is to scale from what was in the lab when we first invested through to a prototype, which we did in 2023-24, and now what we've got at the Roseworthy pilot, which we commissioned in 2025. So the focus for the JV now is on running that pilot, learning from it, and demonstrating increasing solar hydrogen efficiencies within our reactor system, and also demonstrating how we can collaborate with those photocatalyst developers to not only test their materials, but hopefully at increasingly high efficiencies under concentrated sunlight, and also secure partnerships for the JV such that the next commercial step is well supported with that commercial framework around what we're doing with our solar reactors. We also have the 3 patents now granted over our reactor technology, and we'll be continuing to develop that IP and building on that patent portfolio within the year. So to summarize, why we believe in this technology and why we think it's, very worthwhile for the broader green hydrogen space, but also Sparc Technologies, has the potential to be very low cost because of its simple infrastructure and because of not only where the solar hydrogen efficiencies have gone in the recent past, but also where they're going. So you put those two together and you get a market-leading low-cost system, and we'll have basically the car, the photocatalyst provides the fuel, and we'll be the leading light for commercializing photocatalysis, hopefully in the not too distant future. It's only using sunlight to provide the energy, so it's therefore low emissions or zero emissions within the reactor. It's very scalable, which is another benefit of using concentrated solar infrastructure. And we also have heat generation, which is another economic opportunity which we can leverage. I will quickly touch on and wrap up here. This slide I've presented before, but I think it's an important one to look at where Sparc's placed within the industries that we're working. Sparc is currently capped at about $25 million. I mentioned before about what's happening in graphene. What we're seeing is a significant uptake, an uplift in some of the valuations of graphene companies around the globe, particularly in Canada. Not all of these are revenue producing in a commercial way either. So there's a significant tailwind behind graphene, and we're hoping to benefit from that and add to that as well with commercialization of the ecosparc product. And then there's a suite of ASX listed industrial technologies which have also done quite well over the past 6 months or so. So we think there's a lot of upside in Sparc Technology on the market. And to summarize in terms of highlights, we do have two technology segments which are leading in their own fields and provide 2 opportunities for major market disruption. So I think that's quite a unique proposition. We support those with high quality and credentialed partners, and we always take the approach of bringing in the end user as soon as we can to work with us on the development of the technology, because that's ultimately the best and lowest cost way to market in our view. Within graphene, immediate revenue potential, we're looking to build with commercial deals starting this quarter and go from there in what is a huge market where we have a leading position. And Sparc Hydrogen, we're working on the piloting at the moment and securing partnerships, which will provide the platform for growth into that commercial scale up beyond that. And as I mentioned, I think there's a huge amount of upside in Sparc shares when you look at some of our peers and some of the interest that we're seeing at the moment within the industries that we're working. So very pleased to answer any questions at this point, and thanks for your attendance today.
Thank you, Nick, for that update. As Nick said, we'll now open the session to questions. Please submit them through the Q&A, the chat function. I can see that 2 or 3 are starting to come through. While we wait for a few more, Nick, I'm just got a fascination in graphene, as you said in your presentation. It's been promising a lot for 20 years. What has changed in the last year or two, and why has it become so topical?
Yeah, it's an interesting point because there was certainly a lot of fluff around graphene, particularly going back 5 or 10 years, and that has actually been a barrier for us with the coatings companies who tried graphene. It didn't work, and there was a lot of hype about its use and a lot of people shoving materials, or pushing materials into the coatings companies. And that's a barrier we've had to overcome and have overcome. I think the difference now is that the people that are working with graphene have lasted this long, they must sort of know what they're doing. And in Sparc's case, we built a very credible team from the start. And credibility has been the key thing, which has got us to where we are in terms of the number of testing programs we're in, the number of asset owners we're working with, having a paper published with Aramco, that's no small feat for a company, based in Adelaide. So it's a credibility point would be the key one, and credibility drives actual results and data, which is seeing the material now being adopted commercially. The second part of that is that the number of and types of production methods behind graphene, which is causing graphene prices to come down and down and down. So that obviously enhances the commercial proposition, and that's been important for us as well in terms of where we pitch our product.
Thank you, Nick. We've got a good few questions now online. So the first one here is, does the water used in the solar reactor need to be fresh water or desalinated, or can seawater be used?
At this point, it needs to be fresh water. We use the same quality of water that electrolyzers use within our reactors at Roseworthy. There's always been a thought about saline water or brackish water and whether that could be used using the method photocatalysis, and there's been some labs around the world do some work in that space. We haven't gone there yet. We've been focused on our reactors and scaling those, and we don't want to introduce another variable at this point in time, particularly because the photocatalyst materials themselves can be sensitive to impurities. So if we've got impurities in the water, then it leads on to the fact that, well, the photocatalyst might not perform as well. So there's some potential there, but at this point we are using high purity water.
Great, thank you, Nick. Is the sodium battery project research with a university in Japan completely halted? Can you provide more details on this?
Yeah, so we did halt that project when we finished up our last research agreement with QUT, which was probably 18 months ago. It's a space that we really liked, and we've actually seen sodium-ion batteries continue to make ground. So I think we picked the right horse there in terms of battery chemistries in many ways, and the project was certainly interesting. But the TRL was at a point, it was sort of TRL 3, which is the technology readiness level. It would have required a significant amount of investment from Sparc to take it from TRL 3 to something which resembles prototyping and use in sort of field testing, which is TRL 5 or 6. We're talking in the millions of dollars. And at the end of the day, we've decided to focus where we have in our graphene materials and the work with Sparc Hydrogen. We retained the information that we generated with QUT, so we could reignite that project at a future point in time, but there's no plans to do so at this stage.
Right, thank you. Has there been further discussions about how to best generate revenue from Sparc Hydrogen, whether it be through licensing agreements or building out Sparc Hydrogen infrastructure and selling the hydrogen to a consumer directly?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and there's a number of models that we could take. And one of the reasons that we, as a JV, said, look, we need a CEO to come in here and really refine path to market, among other things. So that's a key part of Alana's role, is in terms of thinking around what is the best approach to market. Selling reactors, selling licenses, mixture of both. Where the boundary sits with what Sparc Hydrogen does. So the first step there is to solidify some of the partnerships that we already have, both with photocatalyst suppliers and with the infrastructure providers in terms of the concentrated solar infrastructure, and then moving from there into what that commercial package looks like. So that's all work to be done through this year. So the options are on the table there. We certainly have some views as to what the best path is, but we haven't decided on a model as yet. As I mentioned, we've got funding for the next 12 months due to that grant we were successful with. And a lot of the work that Alana's undertaking is around speaking to the market and speaking to our collaborators around what's the best approach there. One thing I will say, just to add on that, is that I think one thing we have clearly done is uplift the value of the technology by taking it to piloting level. If you look at the valuation of often private companies that are developing technology in hydrogen or other spaces, it doesn't really matter. when they raise money at different valuations as they go up the technology readiness level. And getting to pilot in the field is a really difficult level to fund, which we've supported and managed to get government funding into support. But once you're there, you get a really strong uptick in the valuation that you're then able to command for kind of the next round. So that's one of the key things behind what we've done with Sparc Hydrogen is uplift the value of the technology such that we've got a platform for growth as we approach the commercialisation kind of foray, I guess.
The next one here, Nick, is how many different catalytic conversion technologies are currently being tested?
I will take that question to mean in terms of different photocatalyst materials. So we have a number of different photocatalysts that we're working with in the lab, including some of the best in class, or we believe are best in class materials, in that 5 to 10% solar hydrogen range. The view for the best performing of those is to take them and try them at Roseworthy as well. So that's a key work stream over the next few months. At the moment, the photocatalyst materials that are at Roseworthy are from Japan, from Shinshu University, where we've had a long-standing relationship. If we're talking about different types of direct solar hydrogen technologies, we're focused currently on photocatalysis. There are other similar but different scientific methods, such as photoelectrochemical water splitting, to name one, which are a slightly different approach to what we're doing with photocatalysis, where we're producing hydrogen and oxygen basically on the same surface. Photoelectrochemical, you produce it using sunlight, but the hydrogen comes off one side of a membrane, the oxygen comes off another. We think it's a bit more difficult to scale those materials, and that's why we've focused on photocatalysis to this point in time. Could we, switch or change tack or add that? Yeah, potentially, because some of those PEC materials are quite prospective under concentrated sunlight.
All right. Keep adding the questions. There's some good ones coming here, Nick. Was there much interest in ecosparc following the conference in Dhahran on November 25th, and especially after the award-winning technical paper?
That's a great question. It could almost be a Dorothy Dixer, but I know it's not. But yeah, the short answer is there's been a huge amount of interest. So having the chairman of Aramco's coding committee kind of with us at that conference, not only on stage to get the award, but actually walking around the conference with us speaking to the different coatings companies is really quite huge in terms of getting additional customer interest. So basically, there's been 3 or 4 new programs that we've entered into because of that conference itself. So that's something we'll look to replicate. And we're under active testing as well with that particular end user. We're hoping to get some good results of that during this quarter, which would have more of a commercial angle to it because we've been working that program for some time. But yeah, there was a huge amount of interest that was generated from that. And having that as an example of pulling the coatings companies along is a really, really good one. So not only Aramco, but we've had others that we're working with for some time now, including our field trial participants, which does have an impact for sure on getting to market. And people who have been following the company for a while, would be saying, well, it's been a long time and long time coming in some respects. It is an extremely difficult market to get into. And that's forced us to be innovative around our approach. And I think that's made us very hungry, certainly, but also very nimble as to how we've approached the market. And that dual track slide, which I presented earlier, is truly, I think, the reason why we will and have kind of at an initial stage got it to markets, because we've been pushing on both angles there.
Just a follow up from an earlier question, Nick, what is the feasibility of using desalinated water from desalination plants, given the limited prospects of using fresh water?
Highly feasible. I mean, desalinated water is not as cheap nor energy efficient as getting it out of, the typical mains system. I saw something say it was sort of 40 times more energy intensive in terms of an article that I read this week. But nonetheless, desalinated water And water itself as a cost into our reactor is de minimis. It has absolutely no impact. So the key is access. We're obviously looking to place our reactors in regions with access to water and good sunlight, and also the use case for the hydrogen. So one of the advantages of our technology is that we can put it next to the facility where you want to use the hydrogen. That's certainly where we'll be targeting rollout in the initial phase. So in terms of feasibility, it's highly, highly feasible. It's just about, access as much as anything. And, water is accessible. I know it's a precious commodity, but it won't restrict our route to market, put it that way.
Right. There are a number of other questions coming through. So if we do not get to your questions on the call, just conscious of time, we will follow up with you directly, or if you haven't asked a question, do shoot them through to either NWR or Nick. So probably time for a couple of more questions, Nick. One here on a slide, you showed an article regarding some work being done on using graphene as an alternative for silicon in semiconductors, obviously very topical. Does the research Sparc does on ecosparc across types or grades of graphene be leveraged for that research?
It's a very interesting question, and there is some very interesting work going on in that space. So one of graphene's properties is conductivity. I see a wide range of sort of claims, but what I saw recently was that it's 10,000 times more conductive than copper. Now, don't quote me on that. It's not my claim. But nonetheless, graphene is very conductive. We can actually incorporate graphene into coatings to make the coatings slightly conductive. And that's a property that we are investigating to sit outside of some of the work we're doing in ecosparc. So graphene is a conductor. It's obviously a material that can be worked with. It's small as well. So there is good applications there in the semiconductor space. We are not set up to do that type of work. It's highly complex work and very R&D intensive in terms of facilities. So we're not doing that work, nor do we have any immediate aspirations to do that work either. It's sort of outside what I would say is our expertise.
Nick, just a final one, given the time. Long-term shareholder here, good to see progress, movement in share price, but what should we be looking out for in 26 in terms of next catalyst to move it further?
Look, it's hard to go past the commercialization of ecosparc enhanced coatings. We've invested a lot of time, money, effort into that side of the business, and validating what we've done there beyond, an initial commercial sale, which is great, but within a widely used product in the coatings industry would be a major catalyst for the business, and really underwrite the growth that is to come there within that massive market. And we didn't on this call, but talk about barriers to entry. The main barrier to entry is the 5 years of work that we've done with the coatings companies and developing the product, 5+ years. That can't be replicated or shortcut. So can someone kind of follow us on our coattails? Possibly, but it will take them a long time, and it will give us a long runway to establish what is, we believe, the market-leading graphene-based additive protected coatings. So I think that's certainly the one to look out for in the not too distant future. And I'm hoping that is followed fairly quickly with more deals with different companies. So having Dulux named against us was a good milestone, not in a commercial form, but nonetheless the first large paint company which is publicly alongside Sparc. We'll be adding to that over the next months with those commercially released products, which will be really significant. On Sparc Hydrogen, it's all around getting out data from the pilots. So we've been operating it for a few weeks now. We'll look to do an update there, and then securing partnerships which will support that commercial business case, commercial model that we'll be taking for the next step for the JV. So that's Alana's role, as I said, and she's been fantastic in the early days. She's very well connected in the hydrogen space. Got a really strong commercial acumen, and I think places us really well to take that next step for the Sparc Hydrogen JV. So that's probably what I'd point to. We've got a number of other things we're working on in the background, which I think provide some additional sort of news flow, etc., that we have to come over the next weeks and months.
Thank you, Nick. More questions are still coming through, so we will definitely go back to you directly, just conscious of time. So just going to wrap it up now. So thank you, Nick, and everyone for joining us today on today's call. We appreciate the continued support in Sparc Technologies. And as Nick just outlined, I think 26 is going to be a very exciting year, and we look forward to keeping you updated on Sparc's progress. So thank you, Nick, and that concludes today's webinar.
Thanks, Aidan. Thanks, everyone.